I believe in my core, anything can be a compelling story. Anything. The storyteller just needs to know pacing, tone, presence, those kind of, I think most of compelling storytelling is actually not in the words. I think it's in a lot of the intangibles, physical connection, like the way you hold yourself.
Hey, what's up, friends? Grant Baldwin here. Welcome back to the Speaker Lab podcast. Glad you are joining us today. Today, we're going to be chatting with Katie Quesada, talking all things storytelling. And so, whatever type of speaking you're doing, wherever you're at in your speaking journey, you need to become excellent at telling stories from stage. And so, Katie is the lady to help us with that. So, Katie, welcome. Good to have you here today.
Thanks for having me, Grant. I'm so excited to be here.
All right, how did you get into storytelling? What's your hero's journey to this moment on all things storytelling?
Absolutely. 6-ish years ago now, I actually worked in the nonprofit space, and a teeny tiny part of my job at that role is that people would tell me their life story, which on average takes people anywhere from 1 hour to 3 hours, right? Depending on how long-winded they are, how old they are. They would tell me their life story, long form, and I would help them say it in 6 minutes or less from a stage. And so I did that over and over and over and over and over again. It was like this tiny part of my job that was not on my job description, that no one really knew what was happening, but it was just people sharing their personal narratives in connection to this nonprofit over and over again. And it was my favorite part of my job, but it was not actually a part of my job. It was, just kind of this side project that I created. As that was happening, the job went really south and things got toxic. And my husband and I were like, oh no, we got to not do this anymore. And I was like, I got to quit my job, which was a big, scary thing for me at the time. It was a field I had been in forever. I thought this is what I was going to do for the rest of my life. I was terrified. Long, wild story short, we sold everything we owned. We moved into an RV, my husband and I. I quit my job and I launched a storytelling consulting business out of the RV. So one of my dear friends said to me after I quit and kind of my life fell apart in a million ways, she said, do you think you're going to be a storytelling coach now? And I said, is that a job? And she was like, I don't know. And I was like, me neither. So I had been speaking for years before that in that nonprofit world. But then I transitioned and started working with individuals on their personal stories. And then I started doing consulting. And then I really landed in the corporate workshop space and have done lots of corporate workshops. And now here we are 6 years later. Yeah. And my husband and I own a Quesada Consulting Group, and I get to do on-sites, keynotes, and workshops. This year I've done them for brands like Zillow, Nike, United Healthcare, Optum. So all I do is concise and compelling human storytelling. I cannot help you write your novel. I do not know what to do about all of your web copy. I do human-centric, especially, in-person storytelling.
Now, you touched on a little bit there, but as it relates to storytelling, how should we be thinking about storytelling? Because it could be like a first-person thing that I experienced, or it could be, let me tell you about something from the 1800s and this anecdote that I came across, and I just want to tell it in a compelling way. So how should we be thinking about the different types of storytelling?
Yeah, so the storytelling work that I do specifically is, how do we make things more concise and compelling, especially in the spoken word? So yes, I think all of those could be good stories. I mean, I'd maybe avoid the 1800 one. That sounded like it wasn't off to a good start. But I feel like your personal stories is definitely the home run. And then it translates into personal narratives, pitches, presentations. Obviously, when you're in a corporate environment, how you share about the work you do, why it matters, internal storytelling, etc. So that's kind of the lane that I'm in. But yes, storytelling is very meta, right? It's like, what isn't storytelling? You're like, okay, thank you. But it isn't a lot of things, and it is some things. But the work specifically that I specialize in, is that concise and compelling human-centric storytelling. So how to build a story, how to find your stories, how do we create them in such a way that people want to listen? And a lot of the work, I think the work is working because our brains are bored. And people tell way too long of stories with way too many details. And companies are still doing presentations with 94 slides and 150 numbers. And nobody's listening, and the presenter doesn't remember it either, right? Neither parties remember what happened. So I think it's more about grabbing attention, creating memorable experiences, and human feeling. That's kind of the outcome of good storytelling that my clients land on.
So when we talk about like concise, it's true that like stories can become very, very long-winded, and they add in a lot of details that just aren't relevant and don't move the story forward. Like I remember a friend would always say, like, when you watch a sitcom, you never see anyone going to the bathroom. Like they just cut out the stuff that doesn't move the story forward. And so there's times where like we're working on a story or we're telling a story. It's like, oh, but you need to know this and you need to know that. And you're like, but you get to the punchline and you don't, So how do you take a story and make it concise without like just whipping through it and buzzing through it? And you're like, I didn't have time for the it to really like marinate with the audience.
Yeah. The question I ask instead of what happened is like, what feeling do you want to have come across? What do you want the audience to feel? What do they value? You usually want to match those two things. So you want to figure out what the audience values, and you want to match that with a feeling. The
Mm-hmm.
rest of it is basically just fluff. Like, we don't need to know it. The hardest stories for us to cut down are always our own. Right? So like you telling the story of the thing that happened in third grade with your friend, and then you're like, but
Yeah.
Ben, just, Ben's mom actually was recently divorced. You're like, okay,
Yeah.
what? Yeah. I just am trying to get through what's that thing, right? For our own storytelling, it's very hard to let go of those details, but really it's just practice. It's just a skill that anyone else can build, right? It's truly a skill set, storytelling. So we have to figure out how to cut unnecessary details. I have some frameworks for this that I work through with people for kind of how to figure out what should be said where.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's the hope, is that we can actually take a step back and say, okay, if the other person looking at me had half the time I think they do, and I wanted them to feel something, what would I share?
Yeah.
Instead of, how do I tell the whole story?
You got a framework there that you could throw at us that would make sense in
Yeah.
the audio format?
Yeah, absolutely. Typically, I start with just the 3 C's of storytelling, which are
Okay.
context, conflict, conclusion. This
Okay.
is the most basic way I can describe storytelling. Mind you, Pixar has 22 rules of storytelling, and there's like 1,000 books on storytelling currently out. Like there's a lot of resources on this that are very long, but I am a mom and I'm tired and I need everything to be very short and memorable.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, mine is just the 3 C's of storytelling: context, conflict, and conclusion. All stories have those 3 things, no matter how short and how long. And all of us overdo one and underdo another. All of us. We have a weak C and a strong C. So, for example, context. I reference my friends, and they know that I say this, so don't worry. If they're listening, they know that I roast them.
We're throwing them under the bus. That's fine.
Exactly. So my friend Annie, she's the queen of context, and she knows it. And I think it's actually because she's a very talented writer. But she will tell stories like this. Okay, do you remember in 2021 we were walking down Myrtle, and then you had that sweatshirt, and then you had just gotten your new car, and you remember that restaurant? And I'm like, Annie, where? First of all, no,
Where are we going? Yeah.
Yeah, I remember nothing you've shared so far. And second of all, where are we headed? You're taking me on the journey that I'm going to fall off the train before we get there, right? So some of us just give way too many details and context. But on the flip side, some of us give way too little context, right? And this was another one of my friends. And he used to share stories like this. Yeah, there was a horse. I'm like, where? Right? He's like, in the street. I'm like, when? He's like, yesterday. I'm like, where
crazy.
were you?
Wow.
Yeah. And I have to ask him 19 questions to get to the narrative, right? So you give too little context if someone immediately asks questions when you're storytelling. That's how you know in your brain, like, oh, they don't know who I'm talking about, where I was, what's happening, or what's going on. They can't picture it.
Yeah.
So if you don't give enough context, someone couldn't immediately picture it. If you give too much context, you're taking me on a journey I'm going to drown in. Conflict is similar. So some people give away too much conflict, and their stories end up being negative. They accidentally get into a negative storytelling space where the whole thing is too suspenseful or too negative. We all know people like this. If you've ever worked on a team, there's always one, someone who says like, oh, I came to work and the lines were long. My lunch isn't even good. You're like,
woe
oh,
is me.
Yeah. Like that's your whole day. That's what you're telling me about your whole day. And then some of us use way too little conflict. And those are typically people pleasers. And this is really important, I think, in the speaking space. I see this often. People will tell a story, but they don't want to make anyone anxious or worried about them or feel bad. So they tell a story like, yeah, it was so wild. I had cancer, but I'm fine. I'm totally fine. And you're fine, right? We're both fine. And I'm like, wait, you told me nothing. You left out the good part. So when you choose to leave out the conflict in storytelling, you're really choosing to leave out someone else's survival guide. Right? Like we have to tell the truth. What was hard? What did you fear? What did you feel? And the cool thing about storytelling, as you know, in the speaker space, the hard thing doesn't even have to have happened. You can just say, I was worried that, right? Like you can just share like, oh my gosh, yeah, we went to a concert and honestly, I was so worried that I couldn't even get out the doors, right? That didn't happen, but it made the story better than I had a great time at the concert. Yeah. So having that kind of conflict weight, and then conclusion is how you actually land the plane. And landing the plane is when you can start to say it. That's where leadership, you start to sound like a leader. You really can tie a bow. You say, I'm telling you this because now we know because of this, you can, your part in this is, have you ever, you actually get to wrap it. And the goal of a strong conclusion is that the other person thinks about themselves, not that the other person thinks about you.
Yeah.
You want to wrap a story. The goal of really good storytelling is that somebody else is thinking about themselves the whole time, which is very counterintuitive, but it's how you create a good narrative.
Is the ultimate way to do that come down to the conclusion, because this is a mistake that speakers will make sometimes, is they will tell some overcoming obstacle story or some life accomplishment or achievement that they had, and it kind of gets to the end of the story, or kind of gets to the end of the talk or the message, and it's just kind of like, good for you, but like, what does that have to do with me? And it kind of feels like either
For sure.
some type of brag session, or it's either some type of like therapy session on, let me just unpack my trauma on stage in front of an audience. So how does a speaker transition from, here's this cool thing that I did or overcame or accomplished or achievement, but has nothing to do with me? How does this apply to you? So is the conclusion how we connect those dots?
Yes, great. Yes, that the conclusion is how we connect those dots, because you have to land in a value, not in an event. So Jess Ekstrom has a great way to say this, which is that you always have to move from moments to meaning. And what that means is, there are speakers who, I see this as well, they tell me like an event list, everything that happened, right?
Yeah.
But they don't ever, so when we share our life story only as events of what happened to us, we make our story doors too narrow. So, for example, for me, my husband and I lived in an RV for 2 years, right? We lived in 180 square feet with our 2 children for 2 years. Like, that's a very specific event.
Yeah.
So if I were to say from a stage, like, have you ever wanted to live in less than 200 square feet for 2 years? No one's going to raise their hand, right? No one's going to raise their hand. But if instead I said, like, have you ever had a season of your life where you wanted simplicity? Have you ever had a season of your life where you felt like you were kind of overwhelmed by your stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever had a season of your life where you thought, like, could I live totally differently? Those 3 things were me taking my event and giving them shared meaning with me and the audience.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm connecting to what they value as opposed to reiterating what happened to me.
Yeah.
So in the conclusion, you have to land on the audience values, not on your ending of the story, right?
Yeah.
So yes, I totally agree with you, especially when somebody ends with like, and then I won the award, and now I am a champion. And you're
Good
like,
for
great.
you.
Yes, I could have watched a reel on this. What does this have to do with me? So instead, ending on like, what I learned is that I think you should typically end in shared language, shared value. You have to mirror it so that the audience is really thinking about themselves in the conclusion as much as possible.
You mentioned 2 things. One, that it's important for stories to be concise, and 2, for stories to be compelling. I think oftentimes maybe speakers may have like a limiting belief that I don't know, there's nothing that feels compelling about my life. Like, I'm looking in the mirror, and like, I remember I felt like this early on. I've shared before that I met a speaker who had like, his life story was, he had cancer as a child, had a leg amputated, went on to compete in like the downhill skiing in the Paralympics. And he's just telling me that, and I'm just like, I can't compete with that. Like, I'm a white male from the Midwest who's had like a normal, average, middle class family life, So there's nothing on paper where, like, you hear his story, you're like, you got to say that on stage. That's amazing, or someone who, whatever, has experienced some crazy traumatic life situation. So I think for a lot of speakers, there is kind of the thing of like, I don't know what's compelling, and compelling is oftentimes like in the eye of the beholder from the audience perspective. Even for you may feel like, I lived in an RV, but like a lot of people do. So like, what's the big deal? But there may be large amounts of people who would be like, you did what? Tell me more. That's fascinating. So what makes something compelling?
I mean, in the simplest way, if you want someone to do something, you're going to have to make them feel something. So I think compelling is connected more to emotive feeling. Like, I think I'd probably start thinking to myself, I mean, I have a story mapping experience that I go through in workshops with people. So I literally ask people to look back, identify 7 key moments from their life, and assign value or meaning to it. Then from there, they share at tables and see like, oh, wow, what was, and I make them do it very quickly, because you could spend 5 days on that activity, right? You can go to therapy over that activity. You can cry and call your mom over that activity. We're not doing any of that. It's like a quick, high level, what happened to you? And for a lot of people, it's like, I didn't get on the football team.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, my dog died. And those are their hardest things they've ever been through. Like, which obviously I'm happy for them. That's great news. Sometimes I'm also in workshops where it's like, I survived a school shooting.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, so the weight of that is obviously heavy, but I believe in my core, anything can be a compelling story. Anything. The storyteller just needs to know pacing, tone, presence, those kind of, I think most of compelling storytelling is actually not in the words. I think it's in a lot of the intangibles, physical connection, like the way you hold yourself. I've seen people tell stories about, buying a Coke. And I'm like, hanging on to every word that they're saying because it's so well told. So I think anything can be a compelling story. I don't think it matters if you haven't been through significant traumatic events. I do think it is important, though, to see your life narratively and start to take note of the stories you do have. because the blanket statement, nothing's happened to me, that is just a lack of looking back.
Yeah.
You just haven't done the work. Like, have you ever moved? Have you ever broken up? Have you ever had an animal? Have you ever had a job? What hasn't worked? Tell me all the hard things. What's going on with that weird thing with your uncle, right? Like, just let's think through some of the things that have happened to you, because there are stories there for sure that are compelling. Because you're a human, you've survived things, and in turn, there's some good stories there.
Is there a way to determine what is compelling and what isn't? And I think you have a valid point that anything could be a story,
Yeah.
but not everything's going to make it onto the stage, and there's
Yeah.
going to be plenty of things that end up on the cutting room floor. And so there may be like, hey, we play with and workshop this idea of the story of going to the grocery store and like, wow, this is actually a really compelling story,
Yeah.
versus like some traumatic breakup that you had
Sure.
or some car crash that you're in. It was like, I don't know that there's enough there. So, or maybe like it is great, but it doesn't make it on stage. So, how do you ultimately determine like what should become like a story and what should be like, yeah, there's something there, but maybe it's not ready for stage yet?
That's a great question. I don't know if we know how to answer that immediately in the first read through.
Mm-hmm.
I think there is some feedback, give and take, feel. The first time you give it, you pay attention to which stories really landed, which stories didn't. A great example of this is Jake. I think he's fine with me sharing this, who connected us. He's an amazing speaker. Jake Thompson. He runs Compete Every Day. He is a kick-ass speaker. He's great. And we worked together, and he was like, here's some stories I'm working through. And I'm like, Jake, we just have to make sure that you don't become just like a fit dude, right? Who's like a fit white dude, who gets on stage and is like, you want to know what you need? Work out, right?
Cold plunge.
Exactly. Cold plunge. And he's cracking up. He's like, I know I'm not that. And I'm like, I know. I just want to make sure that you intentionally, through your storytelling, break yourself out of that narrative and find the things in your life. And he's good at this, right? Like he shares some really hard moments in his life, but that authenticity is going to be what cuts through the noise of becoming a stereotype, right? Like, especially in the speaking space, there's enough bro finance, fitness people out there and finance, but there's enough like of those guys that you're like, okay, I get it. You're all the same guy. Whereas Jake isn't. He has a really authentic voice in who he is. And so I was encouraging him like, hey, lean towards that nuance, lean towards the story that are outside of the gym, outside of winning, outside of awards, outside of any recognition. What is under there, right? And some of those are really minor stories for him, and some of those are really big moments for him, but like conversations between him and his wife that he shares, like some really heartfelt stuff, so that you can kind of cut through that noise. So I think sometimes we don't know what's compelling about ourselves and what's not, and so I agree with you, Grant. I think that is a really tricky question to ask. I don't know if I have a clean answer for that, because I also listen to people and like nothing really has ever happened to me. I grew up and I like raised horses and then I rode them across the country, but nothing's ever, and I'm like, excuse me,
let's go back to that one part.
Sometimes we don't know either.
Yeah, it's one thing we talk a lot about on the show is when you're creating a talk or a story or a bit or whatever it may be, like you're making an educated guess. Like, I think this is funny. I think this will make sense. I think this will resonate. I think this will get some type of response. But I don't know until I get up on stage and try it in front, and I'm taking live rounds in front of a live audience here and see what's actually working. Are people paying attention? Are they tracking? Is there something there? And like, okay, maybe I'm starting to figure out like this part isn't resonating and I need to cut that or get to the punchline or get to, the setup quicker or whatever it may be. But you don't know until you get up in front of an audience. Do you think that when you're like for you as a storytelling expert, as you're working on a story, are you able to immediately determine like, this is it, this is gonna kill? Or are you just like, there's something there, but we just gotta try it, and then we'll kind of cut off the fat and add some stuff or cut some stuff or whatever it may be? Or do you feel like you have a pretty good idea if something's gonna work or not?
The only specific example I can think of from this is that like 2 months ago, I was at a dinner party and I told a story that I haven't told in 10 years, truly. And it's the story of me running the Nike women's half marathon. It has a wild ending, and it was a wild event for me. And I told that story at a dinner party, and I got a response. I was like, oh, I forgot that this story is crazy. Like I had like a real heartfelt moment in the room around it. And, one of my guy friends cried. I was like, oh gosh, like, wow, we're really feeling this moment together. And I honestly just forgot that. At this dinner party, I told a story, and it made people feel something. I was giving a keynote 2 weeks later, and I changed my ending and I put in that story. And it went great. It was very well received. It was absolutely the home run ending narrative I needed in that keynote. And I had just honestly forgotten. So one of my like life sayings is that the greatest stories are always told at the dinner table. They're not told on stages or podcasts or platforms. Those are nice places to tell stories, but the
Mm-hmm.
vast majority of our story rough drafts are going to be at a dinner table. When we're like, hey, did I tell you about this thing?
Yeah.
Like that, it's an interpersonal sharing. So I think you can try it out with your friend over coffee or at a dinner party, and then kind of just see if it has any traction or feeling, and then go from there.
Yeah, it seems like one of the best things that speakers can do is sometimes we think like in order to try new material, I have to be in front of it on the
Yeah.
stage in front of a live audience. But really, like you mentioned, I'm at coffee with a friend, I'm at a lunch, I'm at a on a date, I'm with friends, I'm at with family or whatever, and I'm just gonna here's this thing I've kind of been like workshopping in my head. I'm just gonna tell this story and see what happens or see if
Yeah.
there's anything there, or see if
Great.
it's compelling enough to make it to stage. Are there other like venues or ways that we can kind of like low stakes test stories to figure out if they've got legs?
I mean, I'm a huge fan of the Moth. I'm not sure if you are familiar with the Moth
Mm-hmm.
or know of
Yep.
the Moth, but I'm a Moth champion. I tell people to go all the time. But the Moth is live storytelling events across the country. They're in most major cities in America. Every single month there is a theme. So like let's say the theme when I went the first time was adrenaline. So you get to go and you sit in this. I sat in a huge bar in downtown LA at like Bar Theater. I went on my 5th birthday. I was 9 months pregnant. I brought a group of my friends with me, and you put your name in a hat. Everyone does who wants to tell a story around the theme. Then the judges literally live pull 10 names out of an actual hat. You stand up and you have 5 minutes to tell a story around the theme. At the end of 5 minutes, they blow a flute exactly at 5 minutes. Yes, an actual flute. So like, hoo, 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 hoo. And if you go for 30 seconds longer than the flute is blown, you cannot win.
Wow.
So I did the night of adrenaline on my whatever 30 something birthday. So pregnant. I told the story of when I was 21, I camped out through a random series of events and ended up shaking hands with the president, Barack Obama.
Hmm.
Through like me, I camped out. I got into this room. They took us to the back. I leaned over the edge. I like wanted to push past Secret Service, and it was a real adrenaline story. People are fainting. It was like right when he had just become president. And I reached across and I had a birthday hat on, and he looked at me and he said, "Happy birthday." And he shook my hand.
That's cool.
And it was like such a wild story and event. And I told that story. But at minute 5, I wasn't done. They blew the
Flute's
flute.
playing.
Yes. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so I had to wrap that ending. That was such a good thing for me to learn how to do. I was like, oh no, the plane is not close to the runway and I
Mm-hmm.
must land it.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to very quickly pivot, finish, conclude the story, say I met him, wrap it, walk off. And the good news is I won, and I got to go on to Story Slam, and you get to compete higher and higher levels, which is so fun about the Moth. But I think that is something I mean, it's full of all normal everyday people. It is a
Yeah.
master class in storytelling, and it teaches you to do it in 5 minutes or less, which is really helpful.
Is there any practices that you teach or recommend in terms of it's one thing to like sit down like okay let me just like brainstorm for hours here on like my life story and anything that stands out and anything that resonates, but then there's always going to be things that kind of fall through the cracks of oh yeah there was that Nike marathon, oh yeah there was that time at the grocery store where I had that funny interaction, oh yeah there was that thing in the car wash, like
Yeah,
there's going to be these like things that happen in like everyday life, and it's kind of like what makes a good comedian is sometimes that observational. Have
yeah,
you ever noticed on an airplane this happens and the audience is like, yeah, I've never thought
for
about that, but you're
sure.
right. So is there a way to like capture that or like just jot that down or write that? Like, how do you capture things that then may make it into a story?
Yeah, two different ways. So one of the easiest ways, I mean, I tell people to get on ChatGPT all day, every day to
Mm-hmm.
refine their storytelling. I mean, literally, just say to ChatGPT, prompt me with 10 questions that will lead to my best personal stories.
That's good.
Answer them, send it in, get them back, keep the conversation going. Prompt me with 10 questions that will pull up stories from my life that I might not even remember.
Yes.
Like just to get that engine going. I would say that's number one. Number two, my workshops all end for teams with mine, refine, remind. So that's their homework at the end of my workshops. They have to start mining for good stories. They have to start actually asking their people, what's been working? What's good? What's happening? What's a story that's moved you this week? Then they just have a shared Google Doc of stories, right? And they do not need to write them well. It needs to be
Mm-hmm.
a bad note. Random thing from Guy review yesterday, Sarah. It's lowest stakes possible. So everyone dumps in their quote unquote short form stories into this doc. They mine for them. Or if you're an individual, you just start doing this on your phone. You have a phone
Mm-hmm.
note that just says like stories. And if a wild things happens at a grocery store, you just put it in your phone. So you mine for them and then you refine them. That's where I say that put them in ChatGPT and say, take all of these stories, craft them in a way that they could be told from a person in 1 minute or less in a way that's casual, funny, and connected, or professional and leads to sales, whatever the outcome needed from the story is. Then get all those stories back and start to read through. Whoa, this one was good. This one hits. Wow, I like that. Sometimes we actually need our stories told back to us to know
Mm-hmm.
what happened. Like
Yeah.
we need an actual mirror. And then you remind people of them. You need to be retelling the same stories over and over and over again. I mean, I'm sure you've heard this in corporate settings, like they call most leaders need to be the CRO, the chief reminding officer. You
Yeah.
literally just need to walk around telling the same stories, especially if you're a keynote speaker. I'm sure tons of your listeners are so sick of their opening story they could fall down. They're
Yeah.
like, if I tell, I'm like, if I tell my origin story one more time, but it is what they've never heard it.
It's the first time they've heard it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, it has to be fresh to them. So just starting to mine for better stories, then you can refine them with AI and then remind people of them.
I love the idea of using AI. I use ChatGPT religiously for everything, and it is
Yes.
incredibly, incredibly good. And even like from an audio standpoint, where I used to find that in order to use like audio notes, I'd try to like talk in complete sentences, period. And then you're trying to like versus just kind of like stream of consciousness, right?
Yes.
And so
Yes.
I found like with ChatGPT, I just kind of go stream of consciousness, hit
Yes.
record, and so even if you're like, okay, I got this story from a couple years ago, I was running this Nike
Good.
marathon,
Yes.
and oh wait, I got to go back. And so then like that stream of consciousness, and then like, all right, now make this a concise, compelling, interesting story using this framework.
Yes.
It's incredibly, incredibly good at
Yes.
that versus
Yes.
feeling like I got to be polished from the beginning versus like, no, like that's just not the way it works. You got to just kind of like uh, just bomb it verbally all over the page there to figure out like I don't even know where this is going or if there's something here, but let me just get a bunch of stuff out and use this as like a thought partner to help me kind of figure out what the narrative is.
Yes, exactly that. And I think that's probably the most effective tool we can use now. And then when it spits it back out to you, you have to remember this is not my script.
Mm-hmm.
This is not my word for word script. This is a guide to help me master this story.
Yeah.
Because then I have seen people get their ChatGPT script and say like, the day was Thursday. And I'm like, what happened? Right? To your
Yeah.
authentic voice. Like, where did you go? But just reminding yourself, okay. And then once you read through it and you like it, I even like to say, now give this to me as an outline I could memorize.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's just a never endingly helpful robot.
What are the things that differentiate a good storyteller from a great storyteller? Because like you kind of touched on, you could have a good storyteller talking about the time they climbed Mount Everest, and you could have a great storyteller telling about the time they, went to McDonald's, and it's just like, man, that was a really good story. And sometimes it's hard to like really pinpoint and articulate like what made that a great story versus like that version A, the Mount Everest thing should have just been a better story, but it wasn't,
For sure.
So what
For
was
sure.
it about this storyteller and the way that they did it? So are there things that as speakers we can be working on and trying to just level up as storytellers?
Yeah, absolutely. Most of it is going to be pretty nuanced and intangible, is the hard truth.
Mm-hmm.
Between like a great storyteller and a good one and a very good one and a medium good one, I can tell you exactly why bad ones are bad. But the differentiation between like very good and great, I think I would say, first of all, some of it is motive. If you are trying to sound smart, you are not going to tell as good of a story. If you are trying to sound a certain way, right, there is going to be a barrier of inauthenticity that is readable. I get to tell people all the time, are you trying to sound a certain way, right? What's the motive, instead of the motive being to serve with my narrative?
Yeah.
When you can say my only goal is to serve the audience with this narrative, no matter what they have their takeaways be about me, because it's going to serve them, right? There's kind of that motive. And then I think a lot of it is physicality, tone, presence, pausing, waiting, expressiveness. The feeling that person is literally reliving the story with you, right? Their body is on the roller coaster and they're like, I turned the corner and I was like, like that, all those little tiny intangibles that are so nuanced, but really the great storytellers can put themselves physically and emotionally back in the story and then bring you with them and then somehow bring it back to you. And those three pieces are all possible. These are all skills to learn, right? You're probably going to need to have 20% more energy than you're comfortable with. you're going to have to start to practice those little nuanced things so that, I mean, some of us are still telling stories in the exact same tone. And no matter how much you talk like this, truly, if you tell me the best story on earth, if it sounds just like this, it isn't going to land and my brain's going to get bored and I'm done.
Yeah.
So the tonality, right? It's such a huge piece of it.
Is it possible to go, because you see speakers that go over the top with it, whether it's from like pauses or inflections or tone or movements or gestures, and so it's important for like the all of those things to match the room. And so versus, if you're speaking to a group of 20 people, it's gonna be different than if you're speaking to an audience of 5,000. And so how do you make sure that the story energy that you're providing just matches the environment?
I don't know. I think maybe Grant, you can answer that as the pro here. I think I read the room and I feel it in my body. How I do it is I read the room, I feel it in my body, and then especially if it's a small room, I bring the audience in as quickly as I possibly can. I want them thinking about themselves. I want them thinking about their life. I want them taking physical notes. I say things like, I'm going to be with you for 45 minutes. I know there's only 20 of us. My hope is that you walk away with 5 notes on your piece of paper. Like, I redirect it entirely towards the floor versus the stage. Whereas when you're on a stage in front of a 5,000, they are literally basically watching a movie, right? So it is a very different energy, and I have to bring so much more energy to that audience as well. So a lot of it for me is very intuitive for room size. Like, okay, this is a workshop. Here's the goal. This is a small group. Here's the goal. I've been booked for corporate workshops, high ticket corporate workshops, and I get there and there are 4 people.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm like, oh my gosh, 4 people in a workshop is very different than 75, right? That I'm like, all right, let's just start with each of you. I literally will flip the script, right? Like the 4 of you, tell me your story. Where are you from? We have this time together. I'm going to get through half the content, but they're going to share twice as much. So there's going to be a win, right? So I don't know if I have a clean answer for that, but I think it is sort of intuitive.
Yeah. All right. Let me ask you this. A lot of speakers wish that their stories and talks were funnier. Is humor something that is easily insertable or teachable, or is it just kind of like, if you're not funny on off stage, you're probably not gonna be funny on stage, and so don't try to be something that you're not? Like, how do you think about humor and storytelling?
Yeah, I've had a lot of conversations about this. I have had people say, "Hey, Katie, I'd like you to teach me to be funny," and I don't think I can do that. So I've had some really interesting conversations with friends about this, because one of my friends thinks that yes, because you can write a good joke, right? So that's proven. Comedians are writing good jokes.
Yeah.
So anyone can have, kind of those humorous moments land. Here, how I personally view it is this. There is a very big difference between humor and levity. And anyone can bring levity.
Yeah.
Levity is when you give the audience a breath, right? It's also the tool that humor does, right? These are the same tools. Levity is like, oh, I know. And then, I just recently got some hot Cheetos. Anyone still like hot Cheetos? Like, oh, whew, I can take a deep breath. I don't have to be in your trauma story for a minute, right? Like, I can take a breath after your point. Humor provides levity. I don't know how to teach someone specifically the timing required in successful stage humor. I have not figured out how to do that yet. Is it possible? Yes. Are there better coaches than me? For sure, right? Like, there is someone out there who can teach someone to do that. I haven't really figured it out, because humor is so, it is very quick, it is very timed, and it is very paused. Levity, on the other hand, everyone can do, and everyone needs to do it, no matter if you're funny on stage or off stage, or think of yourself as funny or not. Levity is where we literally give people's brain a breath, right? I see speakers all the time. They speak, they only have 40 minutes, and 38 minutes of it was all traumatic.
Yeah.
And by the end, I'm like, I need to go drink some water. You know what I mean? Like,
it's just heavy.
Yes, it's all too heavy. So I really believe that there needs to be regular moments of levity, and levity can be a giggle. It can be a breath. It can be a random thought or idea. It can be a thing that's happening in the room in real time. It can be something about the place you're at, just to give people's brain a little bit of a break to go, it's okay. Anyways, what were you saying? Right. And now I can re-engage. So I think there's a big difference between humor and levity. I don't know how to teach humor perfectly. Levity, anyone can nail.
And I would highly recommend like just watching comedians, because comedians are phenomenal storytellers. They're excellent at communicating some form of a message and keeping a crowd engaged. So recently I was watching, there's a new Mike Birbiglia special on Netflix, and he is a phenomenal storyteller. And this new special that just came out was one I saw live in person 6 months ago here in Nashville. And as soon as it came out, I was like, I got to watch it again, because he's incredibly good at telling one kind of overarching story with all these rabbit trails throughout, but
good.
it continues to weave together, and all these like callbacks that are not just like set up punchline, set up punchline, set up punchline on, one time we're talking about grocery stores, and now we're talking about, airplanes, and now we're talking about going to a restaurant. Like, it's like life experience stuff, but told in a very, very compelling, humorous way. So he would be a great example of someone who is excellent at storytelling and doing it in a humorous, comedic way. So he would definitely be someone to look at. Are there other speakers, storytellers, communicators that you look at and be like, I love fill in the blank?
I completely agree on stand-up comedians. Yes, I mean Nate Bargatze, obviously.
Yes.
Like, I mean, I'll never forget. My husband and I saw Jerry Seinfeld live like a million years ago, right? Like 15 years ago, and he told a story about bathroom stalls, and I have laughed about it in my head for 15 years, thinking about him talking about the space of bathroom stalls and how we figured out how to go to space, but we didn't figure out that inch. Like, why can I see someone going to the bathroom? And I think about that, like, it's all the nuanced, ordinary time, like that's, that's exactly what those three guys do incredibly well, is like this ordinary day in and day out humor that is a super high level of intelligence and great writing. But I agree with you. I think stand-up comedians is amazing. I listen to the Moth podcast. That's a great place to start because it's all real humans telling their personal stories. So I'd say that's a great resource as well. There's a couple other really good pieces to that. I always get hesitant to tell someone like, oh, you love storytelling, watch Star Wars. Right. It's because like, what? Like that's
different context.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas stand-up comedians is such a great thing because it really is real life stories, and you can think to yourself, well, what's happening in my ordinary life that could be this wild? And then how do they land the plane like that? It's usually through, visualization, specific examples, pausing, the way that they have their tone and tenor. They trust the audience and the audience trusts them. There's this really deep connection there that I think is helpful too.
All right, where do we go from here? How do we land the plane? We finished listening here. What's the thing that we need to do next?
I think if you're a speaker and you are listening to this, I want you to lean away from anecdotes and stories of other people.
Okay, I like that.
And lean towards your personal narratives. I think that in the world we're in, especially with AI and ChatGPT, what I am seeing across the board is that what's cutting through the noise is first person human storytelling. I don't think we need to hear any more stories about like in 1971 the ship passed through the anchor, and because of that we now know we're going to be strong, right? Like what? So that would be my encouragement for this audience. I want to hear about that hard thing with your son and that weird thing from the disease from your aunt, and I want to hear about that thing that happened in 6th grade, because those are the things that AI does not know. AI does not know that, right? It didn't write it. It happened to you. So I would encourage all the listeners just to lean into their human storytelling. Even if they don't feel like they have one, start to go through, a story map. I have a course called Story School that they can check out. I mean, there's so many pieces to this that can really help people start to pull those kind of story threads throughout. Lean away from the stories of someone else that you're telling and lean towards your own.
Very good. Katie, if people want to find out more about you, what you're up to, where can we find you?
My name's Katie Quesada, which is Katie, last name Quesada, Quesada. We were joking about that. But that's my Instagram handle. I post storytelling tips almost every day. And my website is the same. It's all the same. It's very clean. You can find me everywhere at my name.
Awesome. Katie, thanks for the time. We appreciate it. This has been awesome.
Thanks, Grant.